everybody, and welcome back for the final time to our coverage of Squid Game here on We Know Scripted TV and Nothing But Netflix. My name is Mike Bloom, and we are back for one last podcast talking about one last game as Squid Game has come to a close. I cannot believe we are here. And we have a lot to get into of some stories that promptly ended, some that were a little more open ended, including possibly the show proper, depending on your interpretation. But I am here with a guy to flip over some of these major events like a Doc-G envelope. It is the one, the only Chappell.
Bam! Yeah, that's me in the alley with Kate Blanchett.
That's like a
Getting
bad
slapped
Clue
around.
outcome.
Right? It's okay. Mike. I don't even know where to start. We did it. We finished Squid Game proper. That's a thing that happened. But the show did it. The show tied up a lot of loose ends, and they left a couple of them dangling for us to talk about what happens next, if there is a next. This has been a fun ride, but this finale was like, it was a lot. There was a lot going on in this finale that I don't think I predicted. I didn't see some of this stuff happening. One thing in particular, and I cannot wait to talk to you about all of it.
Yeah, so overall thoughts about this finale. And I think we can get into some overall thoughts about the season and the series as we continue to kind of like telescope out our focus. It felt good as like a season finale. I'm still kind of chewing over how I feel about it as a series finale. I think that there was one particular moment that I thought felt incredibly earned as this representation of what the show is in general and what they're trying to tell us. But there are a couple of moments, especially as, again, culmination points of some of these character storylines that did have me feeling a little empty by the end of it. I suppose much like any sort of winner of the games would be. And so I'm excited to talk it over with you, Chappell, because as we get into the episode Humans Are, I'll admit my feelings right now are kind of represented by that ellipses at the end of it.
Yeah, famous last words that nobody expected, us to just end with a cliffhanger and then a cliff dive, I guess. I'm with you. I think that this was a good season of television. I think that season 3 of Squid Game, way better than season 2. It felt like Squid Game season 1 again. It felt like the gravitas of these games and these people, like all of that. It was big. I liked it. I did. But there are a few things that I really wish that I could have got more of. And there are a few things that I did not expect. The show going back and tying up some loose ends from like storylines that were laid in season 1.
Yeah.
I didn't care. I was like, who are these people?
Oh, Chappell's not a Chol fan. Confirmed.
I forgot. It's been so long. That's the problem with having these seasons spaced out so far. It's like, you expect me to believe that to remember that Sabiak had like a dying wish that we were supposed to be like trying to tie up. It's like, what? Why is her mom here? I was so confused. I was like, what's going on? So all that to say, they did go back and tie that up. And if you watch it all in close succession, I bet it makes a lot of sense. But just for some of the arcs that we have been spending a lot more time with, yeah, I felt like I was missing out on some stuff. The fact that Gi-hun never goes head to head with the front man, the same man who really the way he put him through the ringer in season 2, I'm thinking at some point we got to get a one-on-one between these two Squid Game winners. And what we end up getting is more like a moral standoff, right? Where it's like, I won the battle or I won the war. You might have won the battle in season 2, but I won the war because humans are ... And then it's like, oh, okay, we did it. But then we did it at the cost of Gi-hun's life as well. And then somehow 222.2.0, ends up winning.
V2.
Yeah, this was crazy. So I don't know. There was a lot going on, Mike. But like I said, as season 3, like I will stand by it. Like anybody who says that, oh, I watched Squid Game season 1, it was good. Season 2, I didn't really watch it. I would say go watch season 3 because it really is a good 6 episodes of television. But some of the choices they made in the finale definitely had me like scratching my head a little bit.
Well, let's go a little bit chronologically through this one. We'll sort of like abandon our usual way of doting upon those three separate storylines because a lot of them are, much like the third game, mingling in this episode. So let's start with sort of the conclusion of the final game of Sky Squid Game here. And again, when we talk about odd character resting points, and again, me being able to sort of not place my thoughts at the moment, I'm kind of feeling that way about MG Coin right now, Chappell. When we talk about like stock rising, stock falling, I mean, you clocked it that he fell not only from a gravitational perspective, but like talk about going black hat. I mean, this dude was threatening Gi-hun. Okay, stand over there on the other side, and then you'll die, and then I'll murder my own child. Like, has to be the most evil thing done in the history of this show. I'm still trying to figure out whether or not this turn was earned, but I guess the more you think about it, maybe he's just literally taking Junhee's final words, right? Which is like, never see me or this child again to heart.
I told you, I started feeling like the show was kind of laying the foundation for that with some of his actions and his reactions to moments in the last episode. That's why I was like, this guy's the devil. I literally was like, he is Satan and he's going to do something really bad. And I didn't think it was going to come down to him trying to just toss the baby off the side, but I definitely thought he could not be trusted. I was like, there's no way where he's going to survive this because he just wasn't moving in lockstep with Gi-hun enough for me to be somebody who like, okay, I'm attempting to save my child. Like there were definitely times where if Gi-hun just fell holding the baby's dead. And if I was really interested in saving that baby, then I would have made sure that wasn't even an option, right? Give me the child, put the child down, whatever the case may be. But he was like playing both sides the entire time. And so I knew we couldn't trust him. Now, but for him to kind of do what he did, which is try to eliminate Gi-hun before the third round even starts, so that he's basically forced to have to murder somebody in order to win the game. It's like, Gi-hun even stops him. Like, so you mean to tell me if I don't cross there, you're going to follow the rules of the game by killing one person, that person being your baby? Do you hear yourself?
Yeah, this guy's an absolute moron. Like, let's make one thing clear. Now you realize that, again, I don't think all the crypto losses that he and many people incurred in these games came in any sort of sense of malice. I think he's truly incompetent. But again, I'm having a tough time wrapping my head around the fact that, like, this was the guy that, to your point, was able to successfully bide his time and be able to, make the move that he does. But maybe I think we saw the writing on the wall when he ends up pushing 100 off, despite like having no good reason to. That I don't know. Has he just gone like full maniacal at this point? Did he just lose his mind that all he saw was getting rid of everyone in the competition so he could walk away billions of won richer?
Right. It's like him to kind of being the guy who was a crypto scammer. It did make it seem like, oh yeah, a lot of these people are here due to his actions, but he didn't seem like he was that calculated individual who was doing this, like you said, out of malice. It was like, oh, he messed up. And then it seems like it is now spiraled into, his back is against the wall. The money is right there. He starts seeing what it looks like if he does get the money. Now Junhee's gone, the child would be gone. Like he basically would walk away from Squid Game super rich with no loose ends, no baby mama, no baby, no child support, none of that stuff. And he's like, I think it finally got to him when they were walking around kind of in that one challenge where he's killing everybody, to kind of to up his chances. I think that's where he kind of it clicks in his head. It was Namgyu, right? Who was like, hey, we could just kill a bunch of people and that'll just he's like, wait, really? Oh, okay. And I think from there he started to think, all right, this should work. I mean, even there's a moment when they tell him all you have to do is get rid of 3 people, and then the 6 of you can just go ahead and win the last game together. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. And I'm thinking, you can't trust that guy. You can't trust him, and you can't trust 100. Turns out he's worse than 100. 100, I thought, was going to start pushing people off as well to try to increase the pot because he owed more money than everybody else.
Right.
But MG Coin, no, I think once he got that bloodlust or even just like that taste of just what it looked like to win and to see that money and to be able to be within grasp of it and to know that Gi-hun's heart wasn't even in it, like I think that's the other part about it. It's like, honestly, I kind of made it to a point where I have somebody I could probably talk out of this game. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's like, I got a baby and a guy who doesn't really want to win. Like he's like, because he doesn't want to kill the baby. This guy's saying that he's above it. He doesn't want to do the bad thing. He doesn't want to do the hard things. So if I'm just a little bit more cunning than the two of them, and it's a baby, one of them is a baby. I had to literally just beat one person and a baby. Like I got this. And so yeah, I think it all just went to his head, and he cracked. And
Yeah.
this is what it looks like. I mean, he was throwing all the theories at Gi-hun. He's like, "Did you know Junhee? Did y'all y'all hiding something about that?"
But like it's very much again that big brother thing. Like when you're in a pre-existing relationship, how do you not assume that everyone else is also in a pre-existing relationship, right? Like, isn't that the twist this season? Why are there only
Yeah.
two pre-existing pairs here?
Right, they know each other. He was literally like, "So y'all know what? So you the baby daddy? Is that what you're trying to tell me?" Like he was going everywhere with these
Yeah.
theories, and I'm thinking, "Oh yeah, he's done. Like this man is cooked." He also was giving Gi-hun the business. Like I mean, like Gi-hun, I thought Gi-hun was like the guy who I could trust in any fight, and he does end up winning the fight, but it was tough.
Well, it's only because he's kind of hoisted by his own petard. Where like if he had not slashed Ki-hun's jacket to shreds, and for what it's
Right.
worth, again, Gi-hun continuing to be the Gi-hun that he is like he could have let go of that jacket anytime when he was hanging off of that
Which
tower.
he should have. What the hell is wrong with him? Like he's like, what are you gonna prove by doing this? I don't know, Mike. Maybe it's okay if I save him in this moment, get up there, press the button, the round starts, he dies, and then me and the baby can run off together. Is that what happens? Because someone has to die this round, and the round doesn't start until we press the green button. And for some reason, MG Coin does all of this before even pressing the button. All he had to do was press the button and then kill Gi-hun, and then he could go with the baby.
I mean, again, I really think it just comes down to the fact that he got greedy. You know, this is a gambler's fallacy that he thought like, okay, well, I could split this money with my child, but like, I'm truly abandoning the past person I was coming into this, down to the fact that I had this child with this woman. I ignored it before. I can ignore it again. And it was just such, again, a malevolent turn from this guy who does end up plummeting to his death. But it ends up being, to your point, that for all of his plotting and scheming, MG Coin got a little too bloodthirsty and did not push the button. Gi-hun has to. And so now we come down to an even more unenviable choice. Kill himself or kill the baby. And again, when you are coming in from the VIP perspective, which I will still say, and you know, we are now being able to take in some feedback from a lot of the fandom, and they are largely in agreement with me. It's far and away the worst thing about Squid Game. And I read like actually an article, I think in, I want to say it was maybe The Guardian, where apparently an actor in season 1 had done an interview where he's like, yeah, I mean, I'll admit the takes they used were the oddest ones that we did, and we couldn't really hear each other on the soundstage because we were talking with masks, so we had to yell a lot, and we were only given the pages of the scenes we were in, so we had no idea what the tone of it was. Still no excuse for season 3. But all that being said, they don't know Gi-hun and his entire story. So their assumption is, oh man, previous winner comes in. Obviously, he's going to kill that baby and take home another thing. Like, we're watching history being made right here. And it winds up being completely different in that Gi-hun, of course, when given the choice to sacrifice himself or let a new generation live on, would take the latter. And this, to me, has to be my favorite part of the episode. I think this made so much sense, right? Despite the fact that you are talking about the fact that we never saw a real 1v1 showdown between Gi-hun and In-ho, that the last conversation they have is In-ho giving him this offer. Gi-hun does kind of win the battle here, at least from a moralistic perspective. He doesn't kill everybody to, again, really showcase, I'm not going to stoop as low as you, In-ho. That's not what people are capable of. And he showcases this here too, as well, by saying like, and you know, Hwang Dong-hyuk has been able to give some interviews after the fact and has said essentially that what Gi-hun's sacrifice sort of embodies is that obviously the problems that were put into the forefront in Squid Game Season 1 have become even worse since then. But there is this idea that actually is showcased through a lot of this 6-month epilogue period is, for lack of a better term, the children are our future. That like we exist in this society that is marred by, you know, ultra capitalistic tendencies, and that people will do anything just to get ahead in life and get a chance at grabbing at that brass ring. But it doesn't mean that we can't make things a little bit better for the person that comes next. And that's, in a manner of speaking, what Gi-hun's sacrifice is supposed to represent here.
I hear you, but I do have a problem. Hear me out. Gi-hun, I'm not saying Gi-hun should kill the baby. I definitely don't think that should have happened. I was like, push the goddamn button. Like, I was just like, somebody push the button before we kill MG Coin. Like, that's what I want. Once he's gone and someone has to die here. Personally, I'm very confused as to what Gi-hun thought was going to then happen to the child. Now, we find out what happens to the child.
Right.
But you are about to sacrifice yourself and leave this child in the hands of a criminal organization that just killed 456 people. This week, you know that they've done it multiple times over and over again. And your thought is, give them the baby. I just was thinking, why would you give them the baby? Why would you give them the baby? I understand why you wouldn't kill the baby. That makes total sense. But the alternative is, I'm going to die. So In-ho can raise this child potentially.
Yep. The man who infamously told me last night, kill everybody. It's fine.
The man who has the baby competing in the Squid Game. You're gonna give him the baby. I just like, I hear you. I understand. Yes, the children are our future. But are they, if you leave them in the hands with In-ho, are they really? And so we get lucky. We do. That In-ho is so softened by this sacrifice that he will go above and beyond to make sure this baby is taken care of by, get this, giving the baby to his brother. What are we doing?
What if it turns out Jung-jae was just a really shitty person? It's like, well, great. You just gifted this, Jung-jae, for all we know, right after the scene where he finds the baby, throws the baby out on the street and keeps the 45.6 billion.
Yeah, I mean, he's a detective, or at least he was, but this man has spent his entire time focused on the Squid Game as well. And so now he is a single father with and we didn't even know about the money yet. We still didn't know that he was going to give him the money too. He didn't have to. That's the thing. All of these layers, right, are like things that happen to happen after Gi-hun's sacrifice. But I just don't think they're things you can count on. While you're standing there on the edge of that cliff, holding that baby, these things need to be going through your mind. I feel like that we were missing the confrontation, the real confrontation between him and In-ho, because then that way you can tie some of these loose ends up. Even if you had got him and Jung-jae together, then you could tie that up. Maybe, hey, if anything happens to me and Jung-hee's baby, you take the baby, something like that. But to just assume, all right, my work here is done. Bye, baby. Well, what? Jung-hee told you to protect this child, and by protecting him, you are leaving him.
I don't know, bringing him generational wealth, I suppose, moving forward is maybe the best way to guarantee it. But yeah, I mean, it does feel, despite the fact that you and I both talked last episode about like, oh yeah, well, Gi-hun's obviously going to survive. The more I think about it, the more this death did feel inevitable. Like, clearly when he re-entered the game, I wouldn't say he did it with an abject death wish, but I think he kind of had an understanding that this was going to be a one-way trip. That it's like, I got very lucky making it through the first time. It's going to be near impossible to have it happen twice. And he was able to nearly make it happen. What really sold it for me were his final words that he gives, where first off, he's facing away from the VIPs. He's facing away from In-ho. He's not doing this to like broadcast a big message to them. Because again, as we'll talk about, what makes this ending so bittersweet is the fact that Gi-hun wins the battle, but you could argue that In-ho kind of wins the war, or at least the people that represent the games. But he ends up saying, humans, we are not horses. We are humans. Humans are, and then he falls backwards. And I love this statement for a couple of reasons. First, we are not horses, I think connects back to the first thing we see of Gi-hun, right? In that very first episode, with how much of just like a lowbrow human he is, that he gets this money and then shamelessly bets it on the horses every single time, which ended up putting him in so much debt that he had to enter the games in the first place. And so he's sort of realizing that, unlike what the VIPs are commentating, like, no, we are living, breathing people with a soul. We're not things that you just bet on. We're not just things that you leave at the track and don't think about anymore. But specifically, the title of this episode, Humans Are, I think is such a brilliant distillation about what the eternal conflict between these two lead men has been, which is, of course, you have In-ho saying, and, Oh Il Nam by comparison in the finale of season 1, which is like, yeah, humans are bad. You know, you might think we're depraved for putting them through it, but if anything, we're just exposing what we're all denying about humanity. Gi-hun, of course, entered himself in the games again in the first place to say, no, humans are good. Humans will inevitably help each other out. And I think the final conclusion that Gi-hun came to, despite the fact that, again, I feel like him not killing everybody was a moral victory, was humans are. Humans are. They're
Yeah.
not good. They're not bad. They just are. They contain multitudes. And trying to think about them in absolutes is an absolute folly.
Yeah, because you could just look at all the characters that we come across over these two Squid Game cycles, and just see that, you know, and can tell that all these humans are making different decisions based on their motivations, but then also going against some of their core values at different times. We talked about MG Coin. He's the most horse-like of anybody, right? Like he is the person who is like, I'm going to win. I'm a horse. I have blinders on. I am going for one goal. I'm not going to sacrifice my time. When horses are racing, a horse doesn't slow down for the next horse to win, right? He's not giving up his position. He's just going to run his race. MG Coin was like, I'm going to win this. There's nothing y'all can do to stop me. And it doesn't matter. Baby or anybody is not going to get between me and the money. So he's like the most horse-like. But we've seen people, Sabiak, we've seen her make a sacrifice. We've seen Gi-hun make the ultimate sacrifice here, I would say, at the last minute, at the finish line even, you know? So there are tons of characters who are doing things that are just not like, they're not one way. None of these characters are just completely, or I mean, I guess like I said, some of them are kind of horses, but you know, like I said, none of these characters can be painted across the spectrum with the same broad brush, right? It's like they all are. And they're all just versions of different human encounters, different interactions, different traumas and things that make them who they are at the end. So yeah, I think it's perfect. There's no reason why Gi-hun should die being correct that people are inherently good after what we just saw. But there's also no reason for us to say that people are inherently bad just because these people were put in bad situations and forced to do bad things based on their situation. You know, some of them are trying to survive, and I don't think trying to survive makes them a bad person, but you know, just trying to survive at the cost of somebody else make them a bad person. Who knows? Maybe that person's a bad person. Why does that person get to, you know, deserves to survive more than this person deserves to survive? It's not for the people of Squid Game to decide. And I think Ilnam and I think what his dad as well, or you know, the other
one of the many loose ends that wasn't tied up. We never know, Chappell.
Yeah, but like that thought that it's like, oh no, these people are bad, and that means we can treat them however we can because and make a sport of it. Yeah, it's not founded by any type of like real logic. It's just what they were using to justify the games. And so yeah, I think at the end of it, I think this is a very touching moment. I think it makes a lot of sense. But I do think that like that in a vacuum is fine. I just think that, you know, the result of thus take this child and do with it with what you will is kind of like a little lopsided to me.
And it's completely unintentional. I do not think Kwon Dun-hyuk is a reality TV fan, but what you were just talking about carries over so much to the work you and I, Chappelle, do in the reality TV front, right? This idea that, yes, when we sometimes see these people interacting, these complete strangers in this incredibly pressurized environment, sometimes what they do is emblematic of society as a whole. But sometimes, especially when we make, you know, personal judgments against people, it's done under the guise of like this incredibly unique set of circumstances for this incredibly unique game. Again, I still think there's psychological aspects you can extrapolate from some of the stuff that's done to talk about what it represents about our world as a whole. But it's also tough to, you know, judge people and their behaviors and accuse them of being things sometimes based on what we see of them in a 42 to 60-minute episode on a weekly basis on our screens.
Yeah. So Squid Game, the actual game that we watched with these VIPs, you know, it does end like this where we get a winner who is a baby, but we do end it with a moral sacrifice, you know, and showing that it's not all about who is the most cunning, who is the one who will do the most to win. This person has won twice, not doing that. Sabiak basically dies because she gets hit with that shard of glass, and then from there she ends up, sacrificing herself, and then he goes up and he wins against another guy who sacrifices himself essentially. And
Yep.
so it's not that, okay, the best person who ever won Squid Game was the person who was willing to do the most to get the furthest all the time. This was a person who went through so many ups and downs in the Squid Game. Gi-hun was a ringer, but not in a traditional sense, right? It wasn't that he was the best fighter, the fastest person, the most evil guy. There was moments where if it wasn't for a show that was basically based on his journey, he would have been gone. We would have lost him a long time ago, where he's like catatonic sitting in the hallway.
Yep.
He doesn't even get to vote a couple times because he just won't get up. They've handcuffed this man to the bed and they're forcing him to stay essentially because he's willing to just run into the line of fire and get like killed at this way. He doesn't care. And so for him to be the one to make it to this point twice, it does speak to what the Squid Game, the games actually stand for, and kind of, completely bumps their idea of this is why we're able to do this, and it's why it's okay that we can do this.
All right, Chappell, like any good series finale, we have to destroy an island here, as finally Jun-ho has arrived. He has alerted the Coast Guard, and we need to get into the destruction of the Korean version of the Squid Game. And specifically, the biggest gripe I have with not even this episode, not even this season, I would say besides the VIP, maybe of the series. What the fuck are we doing with Jun-ho and his brother?
This didn't make no sense. Mike, we spent this entire season trying to get this man to this island, only for him to get to the island and do nothing. He did nothing. He said, "Why did you do that?" And he didn't even get an answer.
Yeah, and Jun-ho just gives his little like coy smile, like he's at a freaking Mount Doom. He's sealed there, being like, "I didn't know, I'm just a cheeky little guy." And then he leaves with the baby.
Bye, brother. Like they didn't even have a conversation. He didn't learn anything new. He spent his entire time trying to get to the island, only to get there and turn right back around and leave. That's it. That was his entire journey. Do you think we needed this, Mike?
No! Absolutely not. The lone thing that Jun-ho contributed to the past 2 seasons is the fact that were he not involved temporarily by partnering up with Gi-hun, he wouldn't have gone in the boat, he wouldn't have targeted the island's location, the Korean Squid Games would not have been destroyed. I will give him that much, that he served as a conduit to get things busted because he had harbored such a huge investigatorial effort. But from a show perspective, we sat through 13 episodes. We were the unlucky ones of Jun-ho riding around on the sea with this guy who's been a mole the entire time for 2+ years. And even when it's staring him dead in the face, he doesn't necessarily know until he starts killing people that he's actually a mole. And then when we finally get him to the island, when we finally think we're going to get this final confrontation, when we get this phone call, when Inho's like, "Turn around, you will regret it." And Jun-ho's like, "Great, bet." And that's the last conversation that we have. It is so incredibly disappointing. And this is where I think a lot of people said that the ending felt rushed. This is definitely where I feel like that's attributed to. I think especially leaving the card on the table, the fact that Inho's background in general, we've gotten drips and drabs of, right? We got a little bit of his backstory in season 2, which I imagine is still true. The whole idea about, his sick wife being pregnant. And I think that obviously what we saw of the last game and how he won is true. But God, I would have loved a flashback. I would have loved a little bit more information about this guy. This is supposed to be our main antagonist. And I feel like we knew like 3 things about him. And you would imagine, okay, at least if we have his brother show up and confront him, we'll find out a little bit more about him. We'll have a little bit more of like a justified ending as to this character and this dynamic. And God, it gave me such blue balls. I thought I hit the O button a billion times. Like this was, God, this really left me disappointed, Chappell, for many reasons, because it almost felt like also a rebuke of far and away our least favorite plot line ever since we've been covering this show.
I don't even know what he meant by "why did you do it?" what was he asking? Why did you do the Squid Game? Why did you apply for this job? Why did you save my life? Why did you like? What was the why? Why did you do what? Why did you like? Was it why did you save me? Why did you shoot me? Why did you, why are you in charge of this organization? Why did you do it? Was the only question we got. We didn't even get an answer for it. I'm very confused.
Yeah, because again, and I think a lot of people will certainly talk about the ending. I think a lot of people are assuming that, okay, if we're doing American Squid Game, we know that the actor who plays In-ho Lee Byung-hun, I believe, speaks English, and so maybe they feel like, oh, we can actually, it's not a remake, it's a sequel series, and we'll tie him in there and get more of his backstory. I don't necessarily know that's the case. I would hope so, but if that is the case, that's a bad look on Netflix. How many times have we seen all of these failed movies, Chappelle, be like, aha, but we'll certainly tease a sequel that must surely come out based on the vast amounts of money that we'll make. And it's like, well, guess what? That might be left in purgatory along with In-ho's backstory. Not to say that we won't get a remake or something of Squid Game because, again, money, but at the same time, if they truly saved this backstory of this man for a completely different series, it's just such a bad look from a creative perspective.
Especially if you made us wait another like 5 or 6 years for it, Mike. Like if they tell us, okay, Squid Game America, Squid Game LA coming this fall, I'm like, all right, whatever. It's soon enough to where I might still care. But 4 years from now, I don't give a damn about In-ho's backstory. I barely give a damn about it now because you should have told me. You should have told me what it was that we were doing with this man this entire time, and his brother doing all of this, all of this. His brother is part of the reason why season 2 wasn't great. We
Yeah.
spent so much time with the how can he get to the island? How can he find his brother? How can he resolve his issues? And we don't even get a real confrontation between the two of them. It's such a missed opportunity, unless, like you said, if they're trying to save it for something else, then I get it because of money. But also, has Squid Game taught us nothing? Isn't there a limit to the amount of things we're willing to do for money? Is this worth it? Is it worth it? Did we miss the plot? Was this supposed to be one and done, and now we're going on to a second spinoff? Or a spinoff for a show that was largely about like, hey, maybe capitalism isn't great all the time, and the things that you do for money should have a limit, and you shouldn't be able to exploit people's pain and traumas like this just for personal gain. And yet here we are about to create a whole American version, because if you thought making Korean people suffer, wait till we do it in your own backyard, America. It's like, oh yeah, Squid Game, we're doing it. I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I didn't like it, Mike.
No, no, I just felt like, again, leaving so much meat on the bone, and far and away, I think the largest representation of a really unresolved plot. Now, I guess you could say that, like, maybe the parenthetical is In-ho leaving the child to Junho, but also at the same time, we can talk about the fact that while Gi-hun is sort of the winner in the moment, In-ho is able to escape, and maybe the Korean Squid Games are done. Not to say that he can't get recruited for something else, as we'll talk about at the end of the episode, but like he got away pretty scot-free. Yeah, he's helping carry on the legacy of the winners, but that seems more of a formality than anything. And that does feel purposeful to me. I think it's been said, I think, in some of the interviews since the season came out from Hwang Da-kyuk, who had said that he wanted to create a sort of like realistic ending, right? That the second that Ki-hoon's rebellion failed, it should have been a sign to all of us of like, oh yeah, he can't really win at the end of the game. Like, yeah, this Squid Game will get destroyed as we know it, but like the VIPs are just gallivanting off to their next high stakes pursuit. In-ho is still alive. As we find out, the games are still going around the world. So it is this like almost a bittersweet Twilight Zone ending of like, wow, look at the effort that Ki-hoon and Junho and everybody were able to make to bring this down. It's too bad you like cut one head off the Hydra while the rest of it very merrily lives on.
Yeah, isn't that what Jung-jae was telling him earlier in the series? It's just like, yeah, poor people stress over this stuff. This is our whole entire lives. It's very expensive to be poor, and we are fighting these battles, trying to be good, trying to do the right thing, struggling with that, and getting all the consequences of those actions, while rich people just go on being rich. The way Squid Game Korea ended with this explosion was so casual. This
Yeah.
wasn't like,
Everyone
okay,
got off safe. Even all the employees were fine. They just drove their
yeah,
cars into the ferry.
it was normal AF. It was like, okay, y'all, the games are over. Hit the evacuation button. We're all gonna leave. It's like you would think that that's how they leave anyway. The way how it happened, right? It wasn't like, oh, there's been a breach. Everybody down. Okay, get your stuff. Go, 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 go. No, it was like, hey guys, the Coast Guard is here. I think we should leave. Okay, press the button. Boop. All right, everybody got 30 minutes. We've practiced our exit strategies. Okay, let's go. Come on, file one by one. Come on, come on. Get on the boat. Everybody leaves. It's normal. Nothing changed for these rich people. They went back to their normal lives, including the front man. He walks out so casually. You know, this for this to be his evil empire falling apart, you wouldn't know it. And why? Because it sounds like he has other evil empires elsewhere. And so he goes and ties up these loose ends. He has a couple things he has to do as a person who is honor bound by these decisions to be the Squid Game front man. So he drops off 222's money with his brother, which, you know, okay, that feels a little,
Could have just been by default. He's like, what single young adult do I know? I don't have many friends. I kind of killed them all. I guess Junho, you're the one that's left over instead of leaving this kid in an orphanage.
I mean, I'm just saying how it just feels a little convenient that you just giving 4.56 billion won to your brother, sir. How dare you? You know, like that you keeping this in the family in a weird way. Now I know y'all ain't that cool, but it does feel kind of interesting to me that like of all the people you gave it directly, that's like Jeff Probst, like, hey, $1 million. I just gave it like America's vote, and it was to my wife. Look at that. Like, he was like, oh, he was like, no, sir, I don't think you can do that. But he does. He does. Junho now has a baby and a bunch of money, and Junho has nothing else going on in his life. He literally is like, I guess I'll just hang out with the criminals. Can't be a detective anymore. I'll raise a baby. That's it. Those are his only friends.
What I'm so confused about is we get, again, a sort of lengthened epilogue here with the destruction of the island. It's a 6-month jump. What was Inho doing with that baby in 6 months? You know, was he just taking care of the child? Again, that would make a lot of sense considering that, as he talked about before, the whole reason why he entered the Squid Game was like, okay, maybe this is the child that I never had. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he, again, makes the offer to Gi-hun in the first place. But, like, I was very surprised it wasn't an instantaneous drop-off. Why did he have to wait a whole half year before he's like, I've detached myself enough from this child where I feel okay giving it up to my brother?
Right. And has he been raising this child, or did he just like, okay, get a nanny? Okay, like, hey, in the meantime, like, I just need you to keep this baby. Nope, he dropped a 6-month-old off at his brother's house. And his brother, whose closest allies are criminals. We see him going and getting Woosok out of prison in this episode. And Woosok's like, hey, prison's not so bad. It's been 6 months. You know, it's kind of changed for the better. Oh, well, what are we going to do now? Are you going to go back to being a detective? Nope, can't do that. Not after all of that we saw. Well, what are you going to do? I don't know. I guess I'll just raise this baby. Well, look at that. I'm rich.
Yeah, it's kind of, again, a weird open ending for Junho. I mean, maybe he tried to, like, become his own, like, private investigatorial service, considering, I don't know, like, if I could leave a 5-star review, he'd probably get a 1, maybe 1.5 of, like, dude can geocache like no one's business, but do not believe in his services when it comes to trying to figure out who and who you can't trust.
No, this man is useless. Like if he showed us his resume, it's like, oh, I did my best work. I actually handled the Squid Game case. It's like, oh, what did you do? Well, I got to the island. It's like, oh, and then what? Yeah. That's it. I just kind of left.
It blew up.
It blew up. It's like, so did you catch the guy?
All the evidence got lit on fire. I lost my main suspect.
Right. It's like, did you catch the bad guy? Do you know who he is? Yeah, he's my brother. Oh, that's convenient. So he just got away. Your brother just walked away scot-free. Gotcha. Yeah, no. Somebody get the police in this man's life. I don't know. It just was, to me, like, I understood that someone needed to keep the baby. I just didn't understand how it landed on Junho and why Junho basically is in this position in the first place, right? Like this, like it's like we dragged him along through season 2 just so that he would be around for us to give the baby to when it came time.
Yeah, which is tough because again, I thought he was such an interesting element of season one, considering that as we'll get into Noel, he was the only really perspective outside of the players that we really got. You know, Inho was still this mysterious man, and so it was really cool to like vicariously experience through him what's the behind the scenes of Squid Game. What did the soldiers have to experience? How is it like the players? You know, what happens when you work your way into sort of the center of the earth there, and then it culminates in this awesome twist that it was his brother the entire time. I, I don't know, Chappelle. Like, it's bad to say, but part of me kind of wonders what the series would have looked like if Junho died on that cliff.
Yeah. Because there are other people you could have gave this baby to if you took some extra turns with the story. And I'm looking at Noel. We haven't talked about her at all yet.
Yeah.
But she's a person who lost her baby essentially. It
Maybe
does look
we don't
like
know Schrodinger's baby by the end of this.
right. We saw a file that said the baby was murdered. The husband was murdered. We saw that. But then it turns out that the same broker who was helping Sabiak look for her brother is helping her look for her child that is still allegedly alive. But let's say you said the child is dead. We made that a definitive fact. You know, hey, the child is dead. That would have been a perfect person to take this baby because she is there. She is literally there on the island. She could just grab the baby. She could grab the baby on the way out, take the baby and go. And then let's say they deliver the money to her because of, whatever bond she has with, or the fact that they have to give the baby the money. And so, like, it's like, okay, like we don't really like you. And you did kind of try to take us down, but all things considered, you have the baby won the money fair and square, take the money, right? Like we could have given the baby to her, and I think it would make more sense thematically.
Especially because like she almost shoots herself. Like after reading that information about her daughter, she's ready to be done. And then she hears the baby crying. And I guess that means more of a metaphoric, like, no, I have to remember that maybe there's still a chance my child is out there, so I have to keep going. But yeah, it could have been easily much like Chol and Sung-woo's mother from the end of last season. It would have been a nice little peanut butter chocolate moment of like, hey, she needs a daughter. This child needs a mother. And so she would have left with it. What do you make about Noel's ending here, where it turns out that, 246 does make it out? The daughter is totally fine and well. That did confuse me a bit because, like, is the assumption that she got money then for treatment? And if so, where was it coming from? Because 246 technically didn't win the games. So unless this was just like a miracle, or maybe it was Inho being nice and being like, I'll throw some money towards cancer research just because to help this guy out. He outsmarted me. He got out of my game. Sure, I'll give this to you. But it seems like she is, more than happy to keep living her life in the shadows until she gets this phone call. And I think one of the other reasons why we got sort of the Chol and Sebiak's mother's reunion is I think to set up this guy, this broker. Because if you remember him from season one, he's the guy working with Sabiak. And I think we largely regard him as like kind of a huckster, as like, oh, this guy's clearly scamming her out of her money. He's taking advantage of a desperate woman. He doesn't know exactly what he's doing. And he does help Noel in season two. And I guess this was to prove like he wasn't lying about the child in Hong Kong. And you could say like, yeah, why would, Squid Game producers who put in vicarious amounts of research and, background checks, why would they get it wrong that her child was dead? It's like, well, maybe they didn't note that a guy who previously worked in a glass factory and they had an entire game in season one about telling apart different panes of glass. Like sometimes stuff slips through the cracks when it comes to background check on Squid Game. So I guess I'll throw it to you, Chappelle. Do you think there's a chance that Noel's child is alive?
I guess so. Yeah, Park doesn't have any reason to lie to them. But my issue is more like, why should we care? Like at this point, why does it matter? We've gone through this whole series thinking that the baby was, at probably dead. We get the file that says the baby is dead, and now we hear, well, the baby could be alive. Go find out. And we're like, okay, cool. Now, does that mean I have to watch Squid Game LA to find out, or is this just a thing that's like, some hope in the future, right? Because we saw, the whole Sabiak storyline kind of come out to like, oh, that's a happier story. Maybe there is hope for Noel and she will be able to find her daughter. But if she doesn't, then we're in the same spot we've been at. And that's why I was like, I just feel like the show could have really just handed her the child. And again, maybe they leave this open so that we can explore that for whatever Squid Game decides to do next. But Mike, I really love a show that ends when it ends. I love a
Yeah.
show that says like I'm done and they mean it. I don't like a show that says I'm done, I'm through, I'm not doing this again. And then the next week we hear from the makers of Squid Game. It's like, oh my God, what do you mean? You're like, what are you talking about? Like, I just want to know that the show has a beginning and an end. Like, I feel like this was like a Rick and Morty episode. He's like, things are supposed to start at the beginning and have an ending, and the beginning. Like, you don't have to start in the middle and flash back to the beginning. Like, you could just tell a story from beginning to end. That screenplay, that guy never got that screenplay off on Rick and Morty. But I think that's how I feel. Sometimes, if a lot of these Netflix shows, and I know Netflix shows, they do this thing, right? Where that 3 seasons, they're like, that's all we were gonna give you. But then, like, but what if we gave you a little bit more? What is like, I don't stop it. Tell different stories.
Yeah. The only thing I could think of is that it's less so about like setting this up for a possible story down the line and more so again just a thematic aspect of it. It's almost like the series finale of The Leftovers, and I'll be a little vague here, but The Leftovers ends on an incredibly open-ended question, which is like if one particular character had experienced something or not. And they purposely leave it open because it is a show all about interpretation, and that it's all based on the stuff that you bring in, your assessment of the characters and the plot, and whether or not it's correct, it doesn't matter. And more so matters that like you think through the process in the first place. And maybe that's the case with No Wool as well, that again, it's a bit of a Schrodinger's baby in China, that like it doesn't matter if the baby is alive or not. All that matters is that she keeps going with the hope that it is. And like that speaks to, again, the larger themes of humanity, that even in our darkest times when, she is living this abject, miserable life, she is still kept aloft by the idea that maybe out there somewhere her daughter is alive. Hell, when we talk about Woo-suk and Junho, they're like, hey, all the money's gone from the hotel. Do you think Gi-hun is somehow alive? Like, it speaks to maybe the hopes we hold out, even in the most desperate situations, almost because we are so desperate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can buy that. I can buy that for sure. Because what else does New Old have, right? Like it's just like she was working at this park, and it did feel like her hope then was for that child. We will see her kind of linking back up with this gentleman. He's making caricatures at the park, and he's like, "Do I know you from somewhere?" She's like, "Oh, no, probably not." But then his child walks up, and she's like, "Oh my God, hi!" It's like, "Wait, lady, that's weird. This man just interrogated you about how y'all know each other. You don't know him at all, but the child." She's like, "Well, I've heard. I used to work here, but I'm happy to see that you're strong, like that you're healthy. It's been 6 months, and so keep getting stronger, that kind of thing." So there was hope there. And so, yeah, I think from a hope standpoint, I do think it is nice for her to be able to be at that airport and say like, yeah, like I'm about to get on a plane and I don't know what's on the other end of it, but I'm willing to keep looking. Instead of where she was, just minutes earlier in the episode, holding the gun to the bottom of her neck, where she was ready to give it all up before hearing the baby cry.
All right, well, let's finish the way the series does, Chappell, as In-ho is going to make a trip stateside. He's going to do what Gi-hun never did, which is visit his daughter in LA. Obviously, she angrily rebuffs the mere mention of her father because if you remember, he was on the phone with her saying, hey, I'll see you in LA. I'm bringing a present. See you then. Bye. And then never talked to her again. He turned right the hell around, went back and started his like Captain Ahab like mission to bring down the games. And so In-ho is going to maybe try to help clean the image up a little bit. Be like, by the way, your dad's dead. Here's everything that's left over, including what's remaining of 45.6 billion won. But the bigger thing to talk about, Chappell, is the final thing we watch, which is In-ho in his, Escalade getting stuck in LA traffic, as we all do. And we hear a familiar smack, and not only of an envelope, but across the face. And it does indeed seem like there is, if not an American, at least like an English version of the games, considering that it's Kate Blanchett, who I believe is Australian.
It's Australian lady. Yeah, I said, why is an Australian lady slapping people around in America?
But indeed, we see a little bit of a down on his luck guy who's playing Doc G. I heard some people talk, Chappell, about should this have not have been Doc G? Should this have been like craps or something, more of like an American version of the game. Because I don't know about you, I did not play a lot of G when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's tough because on the one hand, yeah, if you tell me we have American, like we got Squid Game at home, then I want to see some more homegrown American stuff, like, and so like we don't complain about the games we don't understand that we didn't grow up with for the Korean game. So because it's like, okay, that makes sense because these are games that they play and it's regional, it's cultural. And so it's like now you're in America, but we also have Kate Blanchett, who is Australian, slapping a man around in LA. So it's like in LA, it could be anybody. Like it could be any game. They landed in California. If it was maybe like, I don't know, in a place that was a less of a melting pot, then fine. So and then also I that bothers me only if you're telling me that this is indicative of an American Squid Game, and we don't know that. We do not know.
We do not know that.
Yeah, she could just be recruiting in America. Like the Genius will randomly have, American people in it. And you're like, why is that guy here? And so that can happen. But we don't know that there's like a Squid Game, like right off the coast of, whatever, in the Gulf of America, where people are like, this is the perfect place to have this thing. We don't know that to be sure. So I don't really have a real issue with it. But yeah, if they're playing craps or jacks, maybe, I think that might be another one. I think if they're doing that, then that definitely is the blinking light that says, nope, they're in America and we're doing an American thing. Like, look, pay attention. But to me, this felt like they could be taking them right on back. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that okay, now we have a branch here. We don't even know if they have a branch everywhere. Maybe it's not even America. Maybe it's like Survivor and they always play in Fiji. We don't know. And so it didn't bother me that much. What about you?
I'm of a couple minds about it. I liked, again, if we are to take as gospel that this is not a huge flag of, yup, American Squid Game is coming, which again, as we've talked about, there's been a lot of rumor ever since the first season, essentially, of like, okay, will there be an English language version? David Fincher has been talked to attach, but Hwang Dong-hyuk and Netflix have not said anything about it. Through the end of Squid Game, they have not made any mention one way or the other about this happening. If it is indeed indicating that, I feel a lot worse about it. But if we're just taking it as sort of like its own isolated incident, again, I do like the sort of pit in your stomach that the feeling leaves of like, for all the efforts that Gi-hun made, it still keeps going. At the end of the day, the wheel, he did not break the wheel, so the wheel's going to keep turning, albeit with different players. I do like, again, the telescoping out of, okay, this actually is a worldwide thing, and maybe it always has been. My assumption is that they didn't get this up and running in 6 months, that like, there have always been other versions of Squid Game. We just haven't really traveled outside of Korea, so we've never experienced it. So again, the ramifications of the ending, I really enjoy. That I think in true Squid Game fashion, like, there is bright hope, but there's also this like deep depressing darkness that not only will these games continue, but people will actively take a part in it because that's what our society is. I mean, the American version, what are they going to offer? Like, healthcare basically for the next 2 years or something like that might be appealing enough for some people to do a lot for it. What really took me out was Kate Blanchett.
Yeah.
Because Squid Game, at least from my perspective, now maybe, especially Korean listeners can correct me if I'm wrong, if like, I did not think they really cast a lot of big high profile celebrities in Korea for Squid Game. I think they really wanted to purposely make it seem like, okay, these are just ordinary people. You don't want to get taken out of it by being like, oh my God, it's this person, instead of just thinking about, oh no, it's this character. That was completely erased with Kate Blanchett. And I haven't really read any interviews that explained, was this a Netflix decision? Did Hwang Dong-hyuk decide to do this? Because this came out of nowhere, both from a literal perspective, but as well from a casting perspective. It went kind of against, I feel like, the entire conceit of casting this show in the first place.
Okay, but hear me out. If you're casting Squid Game season 3 and Kate Blanchett calls, you kind of just have to give her the role, right?
That's a good point. Yeah. We don't know if she's a super duper fan and tried to put in a call to be like, hey, put me in anything. I'll do your bad ADR as one of your VIPs. I don't care. Put a mask on me.
Yeah. We saw Ed Sheeran just pop up in Game of Thrones. I think that a show like Squid Game, it was the biggest thing Netflix had ever done when it did it for the first time. And
Yeah.
it was a cultural phenomenon. Everybody was talking about it. And so there's no world where some celebrities weren't all in on, oh, I love Squid Game. I could definitely see Kate Blanchett being like, I need to be in this. You know, like, I don't know how, but if you could give me a role in that, I'd love to take it. Or if they, like, her agent gets a call, like, Kate, you know, Squid Game's got a spot for a work. She's like, yeah, tag me in. You know, like, I could definitely see that. But yeah, it is off the wall. Like, I literally yelled Kate Blanchett when I saw it. I said, Kate Blanchett. I was like, what? Because again, also, if you want me to think that this is leading to the American version, she's not who I would have chosen because
Yeah.
she is indeed Australian and she does have an Australian accent, you know. So it was like, Kate Blanchett can also use an American accent. I've heard her do it before. So she could have been like, I'm an American lady. Look, you know, like, let me use this accent to show you that this is American Squid Game. No, I was like, if anything, this confuses me more because I'm thinking, okay, is she just like a transplant who lives in Australia? It happens, you know, like, I mean, who lives in America and she's from Australia. It happens. But again, if your goal is to signify this is America, I don't think you use Kate Blanchett to say that. I think that there are probably much more Americanized, you know, actresses with the same type of value, like screen facial recognition that she would have, right? Like, if it's Julia Roberts, we're like, oh, yep, it's American, you know. Like, I just don't know if Kate Blanchett does that for me, but I also don't know if they care. I think she just needed a role, she wanted it, and they were like, go ahead, girl, do your thing.
I mean, I think what the assumption of an English version of Squid Game brings up as well is sort of my question at the end of this, which is, again, I was satisfied with the series overall as we'll get into our overall thoughts, but like, do we need this? Because when I think about seasons 2 and 3, Chappelle, I don't know if I necessarily like learned anything new. I guess from the character's perspective, yes, and I learned a lot more Korean childhood games, depressingly so. But when you look at the overall themes, again, I really liked the humans are ... message that Gi-hun left. Is it any different from the entire allegory of the homeless man that was waiting in the cold and then someone comes to save him at the stroke of midnight? You know? And so whenever I think about these adaptations or these sequel series, it's almost always a question for me creatively of like, what else do we need to tell of this story? And look, I could be very much surprised, and maybe Kate Blanchett is involved. Maybe it's not linked whatsoever, and it's purely a coincidence. But as we look ahead to like how this series ended and how it makes us feel, part of me does wonder, like, okay, if we keep running back Squid Game, is it more so going to be like a reality show where it's less about almost kind of moving plot along and finding new things out about society at every turn, and more so about like, yep, we kind of knew this at the end of the day, but it has kind of different set dressing and different characters are involved?
Would you be okay with it if it was a movie? If the next step is just Kate Blanchett starring in Squid Game, the movie, you know, we still are tying up some of these loose ends, but they're not necessarily central to
Mm,
the story. You know, like, we get In-ho, we get the baby, but they're kind of, and we even for some reason get Noel and you know, and her baby, but they're not the main story, right? And so we like attach it to Squid Game proper using that, and then we tell a different story starring Kate Blanchett. I think, to me, I would rather that happen than for us to go through another 3 or 4 season series. Because I agree with you. I think that we don't really learn anything we didn't already know coming into season 2 and 3. I think that season 2 was really a letdown for me, but with season 3, it makes sense. You
mm,
know, like, I think that season 3 itself is good because of the character development that they do in season 2 for a lot of
yes,
the people that we
yes.
lose. You know what I'm saying? Not for the people who make it. We learned nothing new about In-ho. We learned nothing new almost about Gi-hun. Noel's just there. Like, we don't learn anything new about those people. But the people we lose along the way, right? Like Jung-jae, like all the soldiers, like all those people, we felt those losses a lot more because of the work they did in season 2. But I don't think you need to go and do another one of these because it told the story. It did. It's like, if the only way you go along with making more of this, if it felt like, okay, this doesn't make sense unless we keep going. And to me, honestly, it does. Like, we're good. We're good. We're good. We don't need to know what In-ho's about to do. We don't need to know what's going to happen to the baby. It doesn't change anything about the story that we were told, right? Where Gi-hun is like trying to prove that humans are not inherently bad, and lands on what the real answer is, that humans are just, they just are, right? I don't think anything else you can do is going to change that. I don't think bringing in a new crop of people, a new situations are going to be like, wait, hold on, wait a minute. Maybe people are inherently bad. Like, I don't think that story has anything else to tell. So yeah, I would be a little annoyed, and a lot annoyed. I'm not gonna lie to you. I would be incensed if I find out that there's another Squid Game series coming to Netflix. But you're right though. There is space for other things to be done because of money, right? Like, so we still have Squid Game, the challenge,
Yep.
which is a thing that exists. And if you want to do a reality show, you can very well do that. But we don't have
Or just
to.
say you were. I don't think anyone's doing background checks.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So that's what, like, we don't have to, like, and I think they like start production on a season 2 of Squid Game, the challenge, allegedly.
I think they're casting it. I still don't think they've officially started filming yet, and I don't know if the reception, and probably there's a lot of viewership behind season 3. So my best guess is that we're gonna get a season 2 at some point.
And so maybe Kate Blanchett is the host of that. Who knows?
That would be incredible. She just put her in the doll costume and just have her stand
Yeah.
there during red light, green light. Yeah, so extrapolating a bit to overall thoughts about season 3 and the series, I think you really hit the nail on the head. I think the past 2 seasons really hit their apex with the first 3 episodes of season 3. In particular,
Mhm.
episode 2, I will still say, now that we've gone through all the episodes, is the best episode of Squid Game since season 1. I think it really hits the high highs that we experience in terms of the devastation and the representation of themes of what do you need to do to complete strangers in order to get ahead, a minuscule amount in the grand scheme of things. And I think, to your point, we really got a lot of emotional payoff, tragically so, for a lot of these
Mhm.
characters that were kept largely alive in season 2. I think, when we look at the latter 3 episodes, it is a little bit of a, for lack of a better term, falling action. I think,
Mhm.
Jun-hee's sacrifice, I think, makes a lot of sense and is like well done, but maybe not necessarily the most surprising thing. MG Coin's turn, I think you've talked to me a little bit into like why there was a lot of seeds that were laid towards it, but it still didn't necessarily pay off in this huge amount for me. Like, oh yes, a mustache twirly villain. And we talked about how the finale contains stuff that we both really loved and stuff that we both really didn't love at the end of the day. That all being said, I still think Squid Game is an incredibly entertaining series. I still would
Mhm.
recommend it to people, even if we feel like seasons 2 and 3 did not necessarily hit the consistent success that season 1 did. Because, again, you and I are avowed reality TV fans. There's something about this inherent sense of competition that has baked within it a running sense of thematics about culture and society and capitalism and morals that keeps us going for 25 years. And so I'm going to keep tuning into it and watching it, even if I feel like I haven't necessarily learned anything new from this show at the end of the day. I still think the destination was worth the journey.
I suspect that this could have been 2 seasons,
Yes.
but because Netflix be like, your contract is for 3, you have to have 3 seasons, and thus we get a lot of things that didn't matter because we had to fill
Mm,
that space. I think if you take out basically all the Junho stuff, all of it, take it all out, and just focus on the people inside of Squid Game. None of the people trying to get to the Squid Game, because it doesn't
hmm
matter, because they could have still blown it up once Noel does her thing. Like,
Yep.
they didn't need that. But if you take that out and he dies when he falls off the cliff, and we really focus on the lives of the people in there, you could tell the same exact story, probably like 4 less episodes. And you could have done, maybe a 10 episode season 3, season 2, with all the episodes of season 3 and some of the character development from season 2, and been fine. I really
Mm.
do think that you could have done that. I think that Netflix probably ordered 3, and so you get 3. But even with season 3 only being 6 episodes,
Yep.
it shows you that they didn't really have the space to do, all the episodes. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like y'all threw that little 6 episodes together at the end. Like, I feel like it's the middle that they really just tried to inflate so that they could use all 6 of those episodes to really end this with a bang. So overall, I agree. It's a great show. It really is.
Yeah.
But due to probably money making reasons, we dragged it out a little too long. Not like that ever happens on television shows. And so, again, we get a show that probably could have been amazing all the way through. And we got like a great show. A great show. It's solid. I recommend it. I hope that other people enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed it. And I definitely enjoyed talking to you about it because I really got
Yeah.
to process my feelings about the show in real time. So now when people ask me about it, I'm like, no, I know exactly what went wrong in Squid Game for me, but I still enjoyed it overall.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that we're not to take, much like a lot of internet criticism that exists out there, don't take sort of any shade we throw towards characters or storylines as like a blanket, consternation against the entire series. There was so much good stuff in it. Again, episode 2 was freaking awesome from
Hmm.
beginning to end. And I had such a great time covering this with you, Chappelle. To your point, I very much felt like I, especially in this episode, had to kind of talk through some of my own feelings, and having such a great sounding board to offer his own fantastic perspectives as well was greatly appreciated. Thank you all so much for listening. I've been reading along with the comments throughout this process. I know a lot of people were grateful to see us come back. If anything, to just serve as a reminder that Squid Game was actually back for season 3. So this was such a great time. Of course, you can let us know your thoughts in the comments and on social media about Squid Game. Do you want to see an American version? What do you
Hmm.
think happens next with these characters? What are your thoughts on the finale, on the season, on the series overall? Let your thoughts be heard. In the meantime, while Chappelle and I are leaving Squid Game behind, we have plenty of stuff going on, respectively, on our ends. Chappelle, what would you like to plug for the listeners out there?
Check out The Snake. Yeah,
Hmm.
like this The Snake is an interesting show. Jenny Autumn and I are covering it. It's on Fox. There are some fun characters, and we're really enjoying talking about it on WeKnowRealityTV.com. So if you go to WeKnowRealityTV.com, subscribe. You will get all that Snake coverage and exit interviews from me and Jenny Autumn every week, and be able to join that conversation, because I really think that Fox could do something with The Snake if they wanted to, but we're going to need more people watching it and talking about it. And so check that out. And then, of course, follow me on social media at Recap Kickback to keep up with everything else I have going on. What about you?
Perfect. Yeah, you can follow me at a Mike Bloom type. At the point this is being released, we'll be finishing up our series about the 25 greatest moments in Survivor history, as voted on by the fans. Got a really great podcast there, recapping the top 5. Baby, of course, I'm still doing postseason interviews for Survivor 48 while Rob is away. We also have the Survivor 50 files. The Reality Flash, whenever there's breaking news in the world of reality TV, I'll be in your eyes and ears. Big news from the world of Australian Survivor, as it lost its own front man, or will be
Mm.
soon, in the form of Jonathan LaPaglia. So I talked with Shannon Gus about that. And finally, Big Brother's coming. Chappelle, you are
Yes.
leaving behind one TV obsession
Mm.
for another, as am I. So, I'm going to be covering that from wall to wall. Everything you need to know about Big Brother as that season goes along. So that's going to do it for our coverage of Squid Game, period, I suppose. Again, we'll see if there's an announcement about an English version. A Squid Game season 2, the challenge comes around. I'm sure we'll be, warming up some coverage for that. But in the meantime, I think much like 456 bodies, we are ready to let this rest. But we certainly will memorialize it with so much fondness. Again, thank you so much for listening. I bid you all a fun Annyeonghi Gaseo. Thank you.